All right, so remember that the law of cosines formulas are a little bit longer than law of sines, and I said you could write them like on your quiz, but I would make sure that you don't spend the time writing out like all three versions of each one. Like hopefully once you establish the pattern for one, you could figure out the other two. So if I were to just write out the ones for the sides, I would say like a squared would equal, it's the other two sides because I don't have an a, minus 2 times the other two sides times the cosine of the angle that I'm looking for its side. And then for the actual angle, I would get the cosine of A equals, and it's the other two sides added together minus the letter that matches over 2BC, which is the first two. Now realize that like these are interchangeable, right? If you look at one, it is just the solved one of the other. If I took the bottom one and multiplied by 2BC, I'd get 2BC cosine A. Yes. Equals b squared plus c squared minus a squared. If I subtract the b squared and the c squared, I'd get negative b squared minus c squared plus 2bc cosine A equals negative a squared, and then all of my signs would just flip. So if you forget one or you're unsure of the order, one can be derived from the other. So if you know one, you can get to the other one. Same thing for the top. If I wanted to solve for this angle, then I would have subtracted these two, and then I would have had to divide by a negative 2bc. The negative would then change all the signs, and I'd end up with the bottom one. So again, you can always, if you get stuck, check it by checking the other one, by resolving the other one. But they will both give you the same equation in the end. All right, so the first one said use law of cosines to solve the triangle. Remember that tomorrow's quiz is just going to say solve the triangle, and you have to figure out if it's law of sines or law of cosines. For law of sines, we did side-side angle, which was our ambiguous case, and we did angle-side angle. For law of cosines, so this was for sines, and then for law of cosines, which is what we're about to do, it's side, 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 and side, angle, side. You won't be able to do the one you're not supposed to do. Like, you won't have enough information. So hopefully you can catch it. But hopefully it's faster for you to go straight to what you need to do. All right, so if I look at number one, this is which of those cases?
Cosine.
Cosine, because it's side, 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 right? So I would say that I'm going to do cosine. And the most important thing with side, side, side is what? Can I do it in any order I want? Has to be the biggest one. So you'd start with what? Which of those numbers, 7, 10, and 15, are the biggest? 15, which means I'm going to start with the cosine of C. So a squared plus b squared minus c squared over 2ab. Cosine C, and actually I will just go straight to cosine negative 1 of a, which is 7 squared, plus b, which is 10 squared, minus c, which is 15 squared, over 2, 7, 10. And this is going to be where you're really careful with your signs because you have to enter in the parentheses at the top. So it's cosine negative 1. Your calculator puts a parentheses, but you need to put a second one. 7 squared plus 10 squared minus 15 squared. Close the parentheses, divided by, open them, 2 times 7 times 10. And you get 122.878. So angle C is 122.88 degrees.
Why do you have to do the biggest?
So what can happen is if it's, you actually can invent a side-side angle scenario where you create a second triangle. That's wrong. So if you do it in the wrong order, and it's not like it's a ratio of the sides that helps you figure out if that's one of those cases, you can't see it from the beginning. But what happens is you get an angle, it looks like it's right, but it's wrong. Because there is no other triangle than this, because it's side, 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 you can only make one triangle. But you create a false triangle if you pick it in the wrong order. If you stick to law of cosines the whole time, you're fine.
Oh,
but if you start with cosine and switch to sine, and you don't do the biggest angle first, then you can create an ambiguous case that doesn't actually exist. If you do cosine the whole time, you're fine. Yeah. All right, so now I'm going to go to angle B. So angle B, I can switch to law of sines if I did the biggest one first, or I can just stay with law of cosines. So this would be cosine negative 1 of a squared plus 15 squared minus 10 squared over 2AB, no, AC, sorry. And again, second cosine, and I make sure I put my parentheses again, 7 squared plus 15 squared minus 10 squared. Close the parentheses, open again, 2 times 7 times 15. And I get angle B, 34.05 degrees. And then for angle C, or angle A, sorry, the last one I have, I can do 180 minus the other 2. With extra time, I would even do law of cosines for the last angle to make sure that they match. But again, I would wait until I got to the end of the quiz and realized I had extra time to go back and do that. And angle A is 23.07. So when you write your answer, you're going to write them in order for me, 23.07 degrees, 34.05 degrees, and 122.88 degrees. Questions? Okay, then 2 is your side angle side scenario. So the first thing you have to do with this is find the missing side. I have B and C, which means I'm solving for A. A squared would equal the square root of B squared, I did both at the same time. Let's start without the square root. B squared plus C squared minus 2BC cosine A. And then I'm going to end up square rooting. So I can do the square root of 4 squared plus 9 squared minus 2 times 4 times 9 times the cosine of 135. And I can do that all in one step. I don't have to stress about the parentheses this time because order of operations follows the flow of what my calculator is getting typed. And I'd get A is 12.16. Then I've got to find angle B and angle C. So because I was given an obtuse angle to begin with, I can switch this to law of sines. If I wasn't given an obtuse angle at the beginning, then I would keep with law of cosines. And again, you can keep law of cosines just to be safe. So if I do that, I would say the cosine of angle B is A squared, which is what I just got, 12.16 squared, plus C squared minus B squared over 2AC. And this time I'm going to do cosine -1 of that whole thing, watching my parentheses. 12.16 squared plus 9 squared minus 4 squared divided by 2 times 12.16 times 9. And I get angle B is 13.46 degrees. So then the last thing I need to find is angle C. And I could subtract the other 2 from 180. Or I could do law of sines again, or I could do both with extra time to check. So then I've got side A, 12.16, angle B, 13.46, and angle C, 31.54. Make sure you're labeling what's what. If your answer includes both side C and angle C and I can't tell the difference between them, be careful. Questions on either of those? Okay, then came the area. This was Heron's formula, right? So if I've got 3 side lengths, again, remember tomorrow it's just going to say area and you've got 2 different kinds. The 3 side lengths is your Heron's formula, which gives you S is A plus B plus C over 2. And then the area is the square root of S times S minus A times S minus B times S minus C. So 2.5 plus 10.2 plus 9 all over 2. Are we going to round that? No, you're not going to round your S. And I get 10.85 and then 10.85 minus 2.5 and 10.85 minus 10.2 and 10.85 minus 9. Chris said you already do that one on my calculator. Save me some time. Did you do it? Yeah. Is that right? Oh, you subtracted each individual one. Okay. 10.4376. Is that what we got? Yes? Good. 10 point, and it will tell you it's round 2. I'm going to do 2 at this point, but it'll tell you what to round to tomorrow. Questions on any of those? So I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Quiz is going to be 2 law of sines because there's 2 different kinds of law of sines. 2 law of cosines because there's 2 different law of cosines. 2 word problems, 1 of each, and 2 areas, 1 of each. That's what your quiz is tomorrow. 8 questions. Okay. These are the word problems from the homework. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and the warm-up? All right. Number 3, a lot of you just got wrong because of the rounding. So I tell you every time, don't stress out about it. The first thing you would have to find for this one is side B. So I would do b squared equals a squared plus c squared minus 2ac cosine b. And I'd get a, which is 43, c, which is 36, 2 times 43 times 36 times the cosine of what? 12 degrees, 35 minutes. So on the quiz tomorrow, if a question is given to you, and I'll state it like when I give you the quiz, but I'll say it now too. If the question gives you an angle in degree, minute, second notation, your answer should be back in degree, minute, second notation. So like A should technically, like Webstein took it as a decimal, but tomorrow's quiz, I expect to see it in degree, minute, second notation. So if I did, not for B, but for the angle. So for B, it would be 43 squared plus 36 squared minus 2 times 43 times 36 times the cosine of 12 degrees, 35 minutes, which is why it's so important that you make sure that you are using the calculator that you are going to use tomorrow so that you're comfortable with it. So B here is 11.10699, so 70, which is that one. Then if I go to do cosine of A, because that's the first angle that's missing, I would do B. Now here's the problem. We round this, right? So if you used it as the entire natural thing, it would have been more accurate. And that's why some of you literally just got like 1 decimal wrong at the end. If you had kept it as 11.106996668, it would have given you that exact answer. But we're going to round ours. Don't stress about it. So technically on the quiz tomorrow, you would have rounded even just to 2 decimal places, and we would have used 11.11 squared plus c, which is 36, squared minus a, which is 43, squared over 2 times 11.11 times 36. And I would do second cosine, open my parentheses, 11.11 squared plus 36 squared minus 43 squared divided by 2 times 11.11 times 36. And A, for me, with the rounded decimals, is 122.48057, and so on and so forth. Which would have been, if it was 2 decimal places, 0.48. If it was 4 decimal places, 4806. So again, I don't want you to stress so much about the rounding to 4 decimal places. I'm not going to make you go that far. 2, this is an exact, like WebAssign uses an algorithm to like figure out the exact value. So it kept that 11.106, blah, 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 the whole thing. And that's why it was a little different. I am not a computer, so when I do the keys for your quiz, I round it, just like you guys do. So I will find the first side, I will round it, and then I will use that value to find the angle. So my answer should match yours. Whatever I round to is like what you have to round to. If it's 2 decimal places, is what your answer should be. Okay? So don't stress about the rounding part too much, because then from there I would just subtract from 180. Okay, 4 was your parallelogram. So we talked about this yesterday, that if I draw the triangle at the bottom, I have to use the properties of parallelograms to figure this one out. If I have A is 27 and B is 41, and they gave you this top angle was 112, what did we say was true about consecutive angles in a parallelogram? They're supplementary. So if I subtract that 112 from 180, I get 68 degrees, which is this angle here. And then I have a side angle side scenario where I would do the D, which is the diagonal, equals the square root of 27 squared plus 41 squared minus 2 times 27 times 41 times the cosine of 68. And that would give you D as 39.76. Then when I go to find C, I use the top triangle. 41 is here, but because this is a parallelogram and opposite sides are the same, 41 is also there. So now I've got this triangle, side angle side again, but the angle is 112. So it is the exact same equation, 27 squared plus 41 squared minus 2 times 27 times 41, except the angle between them is now 112.
Wait, was D like the whole diagonal?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's confusing because I know it's kind of confusing. If it puts it right, like it's putting it, I know usually it puts it kind of in the middle, but it can't put it in the middle this time. So it said the lengths of the diagonals are given by C and D, and that's what it meant. That's the whole diagonal. If, which is an important thing because you're going to see it in the quiz review today, if it wanted just part of that, remember that diagonals bisect each other in a parallelogram. So if it wanted just half of that, you'd have to cut it in half, right? I'd have to divide it by 2.
That's all I need.
Yeah, okay. See what it says it there, but C is 56.92. All right, then came the word problem. So this one said approximate the length of the march. To approximate the length of a march, a surveyor walks 410 meters from point A to point B. So in this case, this was 410. Then it turns 75 degrees. So the angle on the outside is 75 degrees and walks 220 meters to point C. Approximate the length of AC. So this is a side angle side scenario, except that I need to use the 75 to get the angle inside. How do I do that? Subtract from 180. So 180 minus 75 is 105. And now I get X would equal the square root of 220 squared plus 410 squared minus 2 times 220 times 410 times the cosine of 105. And that's 513. So the only thing you had to do, like the only tricky thing on this whole thing was having to subtract it from 180. This one, in my opinion, is not that bad. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, this one said 120-foot vertical tower is to be erected on the side of a hill that makes 6% angle with the horizontal. Find the length of each of the guy wires that are to be anchored 75 feet uphill and downhill from the base of the tower. Honestly, I don't know that you would have needed a diagram this time. So if this is on level with a quiz question, I probably wouldn't have given you the diagram. So be careful. If that's the case, think about what you're drawing. You've got a 120-foot vertical tower. Vertical would mean it's straight up and down. It's to be erected on the side of a hill. So I know there's some sort of a slope here. That's got a 6% or 6-degree angle with the horizontal. So we talked about this the other day, that a horizontal would be a straight line like that. And that makes this 6 or it makes this 6 because those are vertical angles. Either way you could put it. Then it says find the length of each of the 2 guy wires. And I have put guy wires on my quiz before and somebody's like, what the heck's a guy wire? It's just a wire. Okay? That's to be anchored 70 feet uphill. So I've got a wire that's tied to the top going this way and the distance, not accurate, but 75 both uphill and downhill. Then it said find the height of the whole point here is to find the length of each of the guy wires. So I've got one here and I've got one here. Are they the same? No, why not? Because one's longer because the angle here should be 90 plus 6, which is 96. And one's tied to the end of this one, which would be 90 minus 6 or 84. So now I set it up, right? This is side angle side again. X would equal the square root of 75 squared plus 120 squared minus 2 times 75 times 120 times the cosine of 96. And then Y would equal the square root of 75 plus 120 minus 2 times 75 times 120 times the cosine of 84. This one, the shorter wire, would have been the Y, 134.7, and the X, 148.0. So you can see something with a slope. Remember, you've got to take it off of your angle if it's sloped up, add it to your angle if it's sloped down. You could see something, a wire attached, a guy wire just means a regular wire that's attached somewhere. You're going to have to be able to draw this stuff out. All right, and then 10 said 2 ships leave port at 9 a.m. One travels at a bearing north, 53 degrees west. So I've got two ships that leave from the same spot. If one is going north, we're going up. West is right or left? Left. Okay, so now it's traveling along this space, and I know that this is 53 degrees. Now, instead of telling you how far it went, it gave you a speed, right? And a time traveled. So if it travels at 9 miles per hour and it starts at 9 and ends at noon, how long did it travel? How much time?
12 seconds.
Huh? That's the speed. I mean, that's the length, right? But the time is 3 hours. I would do 3 hours times the 9 miles per hour, and I'd get 27 miles. That's how long it traveled. That's the distance. Then I have another one that's at the bearing south, 67 degrees west. So I went south again and west again. This time, 67 degrees at 15 miles an hour. Still traveled 3 hours, so 15 times 3, 45. That means the length here is 45 miles. How far apart are they at noon on that day? So I want to know how far apart they are. So I have the two side lengths, right? But I'm missing the angle between them. How can I find it? Good. All three of these form a line. So if I add the 53 and the 67, I get 120, subtract that from 180, and I get 60 degrees. Now, again, another side angle side scenario, right? So I would get this, the x, whatever that x is, equals the square root of 27 squared plus 45 squared minus 2 times 27 times 45 times the cosine of 60. Which in this case is 39.2, and it's in miles. So they could have just simply said that they traveled on that bearing and they traveled 100 miles. Or they traveled on a certain bearing and they went 120 miles. Whatever it is, that could have given you length. They chose to give you the information as far as time and speed this time, so you had to calculate the length. But again, that's something that I could expect you to do on the quiz tomorrow. So make sure you understand these, because I don't think that these are too hard. And I think this law of sines ones were harder than the ones on the quiz, but these law of cosine ones I would say are pretty right on level. Questions? All right, so your quiz tomorrow is 6-1 and 6-2, okay? I'll say it one more time. Two law of sines questions. One with side angle, in which you're going to have to check for the ambiguous case. And one that is angle side angle. Then you're going to get two, and it just says solve, so you got to make sure you know which one's which, because it may not go in order. Two law of cosine triangle based. And these are your side, and your side angle sides. Remember, side, you're going to start with largest side. And then you'll get two areas. The first is where you've got side angle side given to you, and that's when you do area equals 1/2 AB sine of A. I'm sorry, sine of C. Or you get 1/2 BC sine of A. Or you get 1/2 AC sine of B. So it all depends on what you're given, what letters you choose, but it's the same thing every time. 1/2 the product of the sides times the sine of the angle. And then two word problems. Oh wait, I didn't do the second area, sorry. The other one is side. And this is Heron's, where S is A plus B plus C over 2. And A is the square root of S times S minus A times S minus B times S minus C. And this we make sure that we don't round and then 2-word problems. And those word problems are obviously going to usually most likely be 1 law of sines and 1 law of cosines. So based on what you are given, you'll have to figure out which one to set up. Point value wise, these are worth 15 apiece because they have multiple parts, and these were worth 10 apiece. Questions for me? So I published your quiz review. There's lots of examples there for you to work out. The answers are posted, so I don't want to collect it. But I will say this, remember tomorrow it's a little bit shorter schedule, so you won't have a ton of time to review, okay? So you're gonna come in, if you've got a couple of questions, I can answer a couple questions, but I'm not gonna be able to like work through an ambiguous case one, like that's not gonna happen tomorrow. You're gonna have to, I wanna make sure you get ample amount of time for the quiz, which won't be the whole period because you gotta figure out that you gotta be able to do this on top of vectors for your test. But you'll get a big chunk, a little bit more than you're used to. Everybody's good? Do not walk through those doors tomorrow without a calculator. You will not be able to answer a single question without one.